If you've seen a photo of Central Park, chances are it was taken at the Bethesda Fountain. The fountain is set in a courtyard in front of the lake, and there's a huge stone angel at its center. Like most fountains, people insist on throwing coins in the water. For luck. You'd think that if people were so desperately in need of luck, they'd cough up a little more. Luck has to be worth at least a sawbuck. I was watching as the ripples in the water distorted several pennies at the bottom of the fountain when someone walked up and stood next to me. Without looking up, I said, "Hello, Doris." The previous Monday, I had a meeting with a friend of mine who is also a good source of work. His leads didn't come along often, but when they did, they were usually lucrative and refreshingly above board. I sat on a granite bench in the Lincoln Center atrium, mindlessly thumbing a newspaper that someone had left behind. The atrium is one of the nicer public spaces in the city. It has a distinct tone that only comes from the mingling of tourists, world-class musicians, and people seeking free Wi-Fi. I was pretending to read an article about the latest drought in California when Lewis entered the atrium and walked toward me. He was favoring his right leg and using a cane to support his weight. "Hello, Ryan." He extended his hand and I shook it. He lowered himself onto the bench next to me. "Hello, Detective Lewis. Everything okay?" I said, nodding at his leg. "Yeah, I'm fine. I was making an arrest and the perp cut me." "I'm sorry to hear that, Lou. If you'd said something, we could have met at a more convenient place." Lewis waved away the comment. I asked him a few more questions about the stabbing, trying to dig out the name of this perp so I could pay the guy a visit. But Lou saw right through it. "It's fine. The bitch of it is, they got me shining a seat with my ass at the precinct until I get medical clearance." Mark Lewis taking it easy. Hell must be freezing over. "You're one to talk. Sitting here with other people around you reading a paper like you're a normal person. I should tweet a picture of you." "Since when do you have a Twitter account?" "I don't have a choice. My girls tweet enough pictures of themselves to wallpaper the entire internet. I have to keep an eye on them. I should send them a picture of you as an example of who to stay away from." He pointed his phone at me. I smirked as I folded over the newspaper and held it up to block the camera lens. Lou was born and raised in Ozone Park, and weathered by 18 years as an NYPD detective, which made him a smartass by birth and experience. But he was laying it on a little thick today. He was worried about something. I asked about his daughters and the job, letting the conversation work its way around to his reason for meeting me. "My friend's kid, Renee, has got herself a stalker." Lewis tapped the screen of his phone a few times, and I received an email with a set of photos. I scanned through them as he explained. 4 months ago, she started receiving messages through her LinkedIn account. They were slightly intrusive, but nothing serious. She just thought he was a creep trolling the site and blocked the account. Then he started posting comments on her Twitter and her Instagram. Renee's a tough nut, and smart as hell. She's seen enough spam to know the comments were coming from a bogus account. She contacted the websites, told them about the harassment, and requested the account be banned. One of the people she spoke to suggested she make her posts private. That poor bastard had no idea who he was on the line with. Anyway, when she blocked his social media accounts, he started emailing her. She changed her email address 3 times, but the emails kept coming. Then he started sending pictures. I scanned through the photos as Lewis was talking. All were of the same woman. Attractive, late 30s, blonde. Different clothes, different times of day, different locations. But all taken from a distance, and they got progressively more intrusive. Renee having dinner with a man at a restaurant. Renee kissing him in the back of a cab. Renee having sex with him on the couch in someone's living room. Having an argument with him on the street. Last was a picture of her sleeping in her bed, which was most disturbing because it was clearly taken from inside the apartment. When the picture of her sleeping arrived, she finally called me. The guy in the pictures with her was her boyfriend. I checked him out already. Before or after the stalker showed up? He smiled. Anyway, he's clean. He was a great guy, actually. They made a good couple. He even took the stalker in stride when it turned serious. Didn't work out between them, though. And you can't find the stalker? Oh, we'll find him, but he's smart. All of his emails come from temporary accounts accessed through a prepaid smartphone, and he burns his SIM card every few days. When I talk with computer crimes, they go on about IP addresses and onion skins until I want to slit my throat. It could take months. I'm worried about Renee. I want this resolved before the kid completely unravels. When she isn't working, she barricades herself in the apartment. She's turned the place into a fortress. Checks every crevice before she goes to sleep at night. I'm surprised you aren't permanently camped outside her front door. He gave a half-hearted smile. She chased me off. What does she do for a living? She's assistant director of marketing for Slide magazine. Perfect. Hold up your camera. Why? Because I want you to take my picture. 5 days and a handful of emails later, I met Renee at a Starbucks in Chelsea. She walked in wearing the distinct look of a terrified person trying to appear at ease. I approached her, extending my hand, and she took it with a half-hearted smile. I leaned forward until my mouth was a breath away from her ear, and I said, "I guarantee you'll be completely safe while we're here. Please try and relax." I withdrew, and she slowly inhaled, her face showing the barest hint of relief. My other hand held a cardboard tray with 2 cups of coffee in it. I motioned to an empty table near the front window of the coffee shop, clearly visible from the outside. I pulled the cups out of the tray and handed one to her. She sipped her coffee. Her breathing became shallow again. "You're wearing the same clothes you were in the picture that Uncle Lewis sent me." "I didn't want you to have any trouble recognizing me. Don't worry, I washed them." Renee was facing me, but her eyes continually darted around the room, like the walls were going to fall in on her. "Renee, I know it's hard, but you need..." "Don't fucking tell me to relax. I'm only here because Uncle Lewis said I could trust you. When he said you could help me, I assumed you were a private investigator. I didn't expect an email asking me out on a date like we were set up by our meddling parents. It's creepy as hell and the last thing I need right now. So tell me your game or I'm out of here." I gave her a wry grin. "This isn't a date. It's theater. A matinee for your adoring lunatic. You're playing the part of a marketing exec in need of new talent, and I'm playing a photographer. 2 people having an informal business meeting who end up casually flirting over coffee." "You're putting me on." "You're going to have to trust me. Just pretend I'm someone you're actually attracted to. Who's your favorite celebrity crush?" She shot me a look that pierced me so forcefully, I'm surprised it didn't stake my head to the wall behind me. "Winston Churchill." "Interesting choice. He was one of history's great drunks, you know. One evening, after a few too many drinks, a woman he encountered said, 'Winston, you're drunk. What's more, you're disgustingly drunk.' Churchill responded, 'Indeed I am, madam. And madam, you are ugly. What's more, you are disgustingly ugly. However, tomorrow, I shall be sober.'" Renee refused to smile, but the tension in her shoulders eased a bit, and she folded her arms, leaning her elbows on the table. I leaned forward. "If we play our parts well, and we're very lucky, the lunatic who's been hounding you will be jealous enough to focus his attention on me for a while, giving you a break and me an opportunity." The corner of her mouth hinted at a smile. I reached under the table with my free hand and pressed a penny against the underside of the wooden slab. It seared itself into place, leaving the acidic smell of burning wood hanging in the air. Renee unfolded her arms, tucked her chestnut hair behind her ear, and rubbed the back of her neck, but still said nothing. "If you don't start keeping up your end of the conversation, I'll have to revert back to my Churchill impersonation.
Please don't,
she said as her hand dropped onto my arm. I glanced down at her hand and then back up at her face, which was now cracked with a reluctant grin. Perfect, I said. She immediately became self-conscious and closed down again, but it was enough. My best chance was to catch our stalker in the act, by drawing him out in the open. Stalkers are like bulldogs. Once they have their teeth in someone, they don't let go. When Renee touched my arm and smiled, she gave him something to latch onto. I reached into the back of my mind where time was always needling me and pulled slowly, drawing it out. Red lights swept across the room as the world around us slowed to an imperceptible pace. I slipped my arm out from under her hand and looked around at the customers. Everyone with a cell phone or tablet was a candidate. I walked up and down the rows of tables, but very few phones were held at the correct angle to get a picture of Renee. The few that weren't taking pictures. Most of them were on Twitter or Facebook. A handful were texting. And there was one cross-dresser checking his FetLife profile. I left the coffee shop and scanned the street from one end to the other, looking for anyone who could snap a picture of Renee through the Starbucks window. There was no one holding a camera, and the people with cell phones were too far away to get a decent picture. I had nearly dismissed the people on the street and was about to look for places the stalker could be hiding when something caught my eye. There was a guy waiting at the crosswalk, holding up an iPhone. He had his earbuds in and was holding the mic close to his mouth as though he were making a call, but something wasn't right. His phone was an odd shape. I crossed the street to get a closer look at him. His phone had an attachment clamped over the camera lens that bent at a right angle facing Starbucks. Displayed on the screen of the phone was a picture of Renee and myself, with her hand on my arm. The guy holding the phone had a tuft of brillowy red hair and a mouthful of awkwardly arranged teeth. His eyes intently focused on the screen. He was so young, I guess barely 20. I went through his pockets and found his driver's license. Jeremy Callison. I tucked the license into my pocket and walked back across the street to the coffee shop. Once I'd positioned myself back in the seat, with my arm under Renee's hand, I gently let time recoil back into itself. Renee pulled her hand back as if she'd received a shock.
What was that?
She asked, stretching her fingers and wiggling them slightly. It's a long story. Do you know anyone named Jeremy Callison? She considered the name for a moment, then shook her head.
Why?
His name came up in my research. I'll look into it. In any case, we've given him what he wants. I can take it from here.
That's it?
Pretty much. Though later tonight you should write Lou an email about how you enjoyed meeting me, and thank him. Just in case your stalker is monitoring your email.
What's this going to cost me?
Don't worry about it. It'll be fair and well within your means.
I'm going to need you to be a little more specific than that.
Lou is a friend. I don't have enough friends that I can afford to take advantage of them. Or their nieces. She gave me a long look.
Fair enough.
We finished our coffee and walked to the subway together. I kept my eyes on her as she walked down the stairs to the station, but my brain was analyzing everything in my peripheral vision. No sign of Jeremy. After shadowing Jeremy for a few days and taking a brief tour of his apartment, I had confirmed what a sick fuck he was, but I still didn't know what caused him to latch on to Renee. So I stood on the sidewalk, 1.5 blocks north of Jeremy Callison's building, holding my tablet like a clipboard. At exactly 1:47 p.m., he emerged from the front door and walked uptown. One of the only good things about stalkers, they're compulsive, predictable. I waited in the middle of the sidewalk for him to reach earshot. He made fleeting eye contact with me as he approached, then veered left to pass me. "Excuse me, sir? I'm with the Women's Advocacy Project. and we are talking with people in your community. If I could just have a moment of your time for a quick survey, I said, tapping the screen as though I were completing a form. He stared straight ahead and didn't acknowledge me. As he passed, I said, "Just one question, sir. How many women have you photographed without their permission?" He slowed and looked back over his shoulder, surprised, but kept moving. Just as he was about to turn the corner, I took a deep breath, grabbed hold of the itch of time nagging the corner of my brain, and pulled. When the scene was still, I walked up the block past him and stood around the corner, then released. A moment later, he came around the corner. His pace slowed when he saw me, and his mouth dropped open with confusion. "Another question, Mr. Callison?" I said, looking down as though reading from my tablet. "How often do you use your photo collection to masturbate?" His pace became brisk as he passed me again. I tracked him this way for 10 blocks. Pull, walk, release. "Mr. Callison, have you ever been arrested for exposing yourself in public?" Pull, walk, release. "Have you ever thought about killing a woman?" Pull, walk, release. He was now sprinting up 3rd Avenue. When I'd reached the last spot, I was so fatigued from my tug-of-war with time that I thought I'd collapse onto the sidewalk. I waited in the alley he used as a shortcut to his job. I sent a brief text to Lou telling him where to meet me, and waited. When Jeremy came tearing around the corner into the alley, I tripped him. He face-planted onto the pavement. His feet were scrambling in panic, and his hands were grabbing at his face. I rolled him onto his back and crouched down next to him. His eyes were closed, and he was holding the bridge of his nose, which was now significantly flatter. "We need to talk, Jeremy. Look at me."
You broke my nose.
"That's the least of your problems right now. Open your eyes." His eyes cracked open through a wince as though I would hit him. I held my tablet in front of his face. Displayed on the screen was a copy of a picture of Renee that hung on the wall of Jeremy's apartment.
How did you get that?
I swiped the screen and there was another image of him in his apartment, pictures of Renee spread out on his desk and his hand in his pants. I swiped again and showed him a picture of himself, asleep in bed.
You broke into my apartment? You can't do that. I'm calling the cops.
His hand fished around in his pocket and came up with a cell phone. I snatched it away from him. "Tell you what, I'll call him for you, but you have to answer one question for me." I swiped the screen and showed him a picture of Renee. "Why did you pick her?" He looked longingly at the picture, as though he was seeing an ex-girlfriend he hadn't seen in years. I rapped him on the forehead with the edge of the tablet. "Hey, focus. Why her?"
She likes me. She said so.
Of course she did. When did she say she liked you?
When I was in her office.
Why were you in her office? My patience was wearing thin under the strain of the exhaustion.
I applied for a job at Slide Magazine. She said she liked me, but she couldn't hire me. That I should stay in touch. She'll tell you, just ask her.
Yeah, I'll get right on that. I dialed 911 and handed him the phone. He snatched it away and started rambling to the operator on the other end. Shortly after he started talking, a Crown Victoria pulled up. Lou hauled himself out of the car and limped over to where we were. His badge was clipped to the lapel of his coat. Jeremy was on his feet again, though he was leaning against the building for support.
Arrest him. He attacked me. He broke into my apartment. I want to press charges.
Lou looked at me. I wasn't sure how he wanted to play this, so I just shrugged.
Arrest him.
Calm down, sir. You, Lou said, pointing at me. Come with me. Lou's partner started talking to Jeremy with her notebook out. I walked with Lou to the back of the police cruiser. You sure he's our guy? Oh yeah. You get into his apartment, you'll have everything you need. He says he met her while he was applying for a job. We checked all our appointments for the last 3 months. This guy didn't pop. Maybe he just walked in off the street and she humored him for 10 minutes. Dig into it. You'll find a connection you can use. And you'll want to take him in sooner rather than later. He called 911. Patrol cars will be here any minute.
Yeah, I heard the call come over. Why'd you let him call it in?
Because I was afraid you'd take him down to the piers and see if he knows how to swim. Lou looked at me with a combination of anger and resentment, offended by my implication. He opened his mouth to respond. Don't even try it, Lou. We both know you were thinking about it. I sure as hell would be in your shoes. But I don't want your daughters to have to make the trip up to Ossining every time they want to see you.
So you get to make him suffer and I get to take his statement. That's bullshit.
I did what I had to. If I wanted to make him suffer, I'd hand him over to Renee. Lou tried to stifle a smile.
You know, if I let you go without a word, this guy will probably get spooked and clam up.
Lou cuffed me and put me in the back of a police cruiser, then went back to talk to Jeremy. 15 minutes later, Jeremy was on his way back to the precinct with another detective, and Lou was walking me off the scene. Think you can make it stick? Lou nodded.
Before I could ask him anything, he started babbling on about you and the pictures of his girlfriend in his apartment. At the rate he's going, he'll hang himself on the car ride back to the precinct.
Renee called me the next day to thank me. The relief was evident in her voice.
So, what do I owe you?
Well, that depends. Would you be interested in an open-ended business arrangement?
I'd actually prefer to just pay you. I don't like loose ends.
We have that in common, but hear me out. Slide Magazine is like the New York City hipster Bible. As the marketing director, I'm sure you're very familiar with the people featured in the magazine, sometimes even on a personal level.
I'm not sure I like where this is going.
I'm just saying, celebrity chefs and personal growth gurus really aren't my crowd. If you could help me every now and then with a little information, or make the occasional introduction, I'd appreciate it. That's all I'm asking. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Renee, if I burn you down the line, it only makes my life more difficult.
If you burn me at all, I'll barbecue your nutsack.
So you'll think about it.
I'll get back to you.
Thank you. I hung up and locked the phone. When the screen went dark, I caught my reflection in it. My hair was always a brown tangle that refused to bow to a brush, but it was starting to look like an aggressive patch of weeds, and I had bags under my eyes. I slipped the phone back in my pocket and mindlessly stared into the Bethesda fountain, looking like a drifter in need of a barber and an Ambien. I was watching as the ripples in the water distorted several pennies at the bottom of the fountain when someone walked up and stood next to me. Without looking up, I said, "Hello, Doris."
Please call me Dee Dee.
Nice to meet you, Dee Dee.
How long have you worked for Marshall?
Strictly freelance, I said, shaking my head. That was my first and last job for him. How did you know I wasn't just another guy on the subway platform?
That guy wouldn't have left me cash in exchange for my property, and I heard you follow me into the train station.
I felt the corner of my mouth creep toward a smile. Most people in New York wouldn't have noticed.
The New York I live in, I'd be crazy not to.
I thought about the guys who assaulted her the last time we saw each other. How are you doing? She shrugged.
I'm fine. He wasn't the first guy to grab me, and he'll think twice before he does it again.
No, he'll just take it out on the next woman to cross his path.
Well, aren't you Mr. Good News Happy Guy?
Yeah, I get that a lot. So why the baseball card? There had to be a dozen things in that office worth taking.
I was pissed. I grabbed the first thing that looked valuable. When I saw what it was, I decided to send it to my dad. He's a big baseball fan. I never thought Marshall would bother trying to get it back.
So why were you trying to find me?
I never said thank you.
For the first time, I turned and faced her. Her blue hair spilled down over her shoulders. Her expression was thoughtful, and she carried herself with a relaxed air. Her eyes were a soft green, burned hazel by fierce determination, like leaves in the fall, railing against the coming winter. I realized I'd been staring into her eyes for far too long without speaking, and turned away.
6 months I've been in this city, and you're the first person to do anything nice for me.
Rifling through your purse is nice?
I was talking about the part where you got between me and the rapist.
There was a long but perfectly comfortable silence.
Any chance you'd like to grab a cup of coffee?
I looked at her again and smiled, then dropped my gaze again. This time the silence was short and awkward. I have to go. I had walked about 10 feet when she called out to me.
One more thing?
I turned back to find her typing something into her phone. Yes?
You might want to update the security settings on your phone.
I pulled the phone out of my pocket. It was unlocked and my address book was open. There was a new entry with Dee Dee's phone number and a note attached that read, "Just in case you change your mind." When I looked up, she was already halfway up the path leading out of the park. My eyes followed her up the path and out of sight. I realized I was smiling again. It was irritating.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to rate the Red Shift Chronicles on iTunes. The Red Shift Chronicles is written and performed by Tom Simonson. The show is recorded by Steve Simonson at String Theory Studios. All music for the Red Shift Chronicles is written and performed by Steve Simonson.